This is Charter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance on the central coast of California, joined by Bob Kelley. He is a councilman in Atascadero. And sir, as you know, in 1996, the voters passed Prop 215, legalizing the compassionate use of medical marijuana. It only took 19 years for the state to pass regulations. That was done last summer. But in the regulations, there was a deadline. And that deadline set March 1st as the date by which municipalities needed to do what?
They need to come up with their own ordinances, how they were going to implement 215, or if they didn't meet it, the state would regulate it in their cities. So we want to keep hometown control of it.
And that caused panic, not just in your city. Cities up and down the state were passing ordinances very quickly because they feared that if they didn't pass their own ordinance on cultivation, the state would come in.
That's correct. And because of the process, we were kind of backed in the corner because once you initiate an ordinance, you have to have the first reading, the second reading, and the whole bit. So we really didn't have any options to even hiccup. We had to do it this night and then go forward.
And so what you did is you passed a complete ban on cultivation, but lo and behold, the state revoked the March 1st deadline.
Right.
But you had already passed your ordinance.
That's correct.
So now you're rethinking it.
Yes.
Tell us about what your city is considering. And I just want to let our viewers know Atascadero, a beautiful city in North San Luis Obispo County. I think it's fair to say it's a rural community, more right of center.
Yes.
And so with that background, what's your city considering?
Well, when we had the initial hearing, we had about 15 people that came to the hearing, and these were probably the really people that use it for medical purposes.
True medical need.
And I think our city council, even with the homeless, we're very compassionate, and we did not want to penalize these people who probably have a legitimate use for it and just say, hey, we're not doing anything. So initially, because of the March 1st deadline, we said that we would come back at a later date and address it, which we did.
And so where we are today is the city is looking to repeal the complete ban on cultivation and put what in its place, sir?
Well, what we're going to have, Proposition 215 said that you could have 6 mature plants, 12 immature plants, and up to 8 ounces of marijuana in your possession. So what we did is we came down and said that you could have no more than 9 mature plants and 15 immature plants per dwelling. The reason we did that is we didn't want to have 2, 3, 4, 5 people supposedly in one dwelling with 60 plants going there. There'll be no cultivation outside on open land. There'll be no cultivation in a front yard. And if you're growing it in your backyard or somewhere, it can't hang over the fence into the neighbor's yard.
So here's the question. Not all of us have green thumbs. Not all of us know how to cultivate marijuana. I'm not aware if the marijuana plant needs special care. I don't know if it's a weed that will just grow anywhere. So while I understand why you're taking this approach, what about allowing folks to buy medical marijuana at a brick and mortar store?
Well, we tried to stay away from that. We actually had people that came to our city council meeting, which amazed me, that were already supposedly caregivers.
Right.
And they were saying they were supplying it already, and it was unbeknown to me that
we
had to have this going.
So were they doing it through mobile facilities?
I think some of them were, and a lot of them are working under the caregiver deal. And a caregiver is actually more than a person that just supplies marijuana. A caregiver is supposed to help people buy their groceries, take care of their needs, their restaurants. So, there's an abuse, I think, of the whole problem. And as we've changed our laws recently, there's really no enforcement going on in this. And come November, I think the whole thing is just going to be.
So let's talk about November, sir, because it's hard to deny that the voters of California will likely pass an initiative which will legalize marijuana for recreational use. And let us remember that other states have done such. Colorado, Washington, that very blue state of Alaska, not. Only one state has voted against it, which was Ohio, but that was believed to have been because it was too slanted towards commercial growers. Left, right, and center, it looks like this country is leaning towards legalization.
I think so. I think the other aspect, probably what's really driving it, is the politicians, that somebody's going to make a lot of money off
Right.
of this. And I think you look at some of these small cities
Right.
and what have you, they're saying, oh boy, we can make
Well,
money.
let's talk about that. I had mentioned to you, I had the good fortune of interviewing some folks from the high desert area. Interviewed a councilman from Adelanto, and they are specifically allowing commercial cultivation. They see it as a boon.
Right, I think you'll see that. There's
Right.
a lot of big money in it. You know, I was in law enforcement years ago.
Right.
And got involved in some arrests. I've never seen so much money in my life.
So what is the city of Atascadero going to do should there be legalization? And I remind you that the California Supreme Court has ruled that as a matter of land use, in the medical marijuana context, a city can exclude brick and mortar stores.
Right.
I don't know if that would apply for complete legalization of marijuana. With regard to alcohol, can you preclude alcohol sales in your city?
The ABC takes care of
Right.
that by the licensing of. There's a quota system of how many you can have.
I see.
On that.
So I wonder if there is legalization, if a city could say absolutely no marijuana
Well, they've
retail.
done that in some places. I think there was one just locally. But I think what's going to happen is, I'm kind of like you. I think come November it's
Right.
going to get legalized. And then at that point in time, I think it's going to give us a lot more quality time to actually sit down and put a program together without being backed into the corner, and realize what we have and try to make the best we can out of the situation.
At the same time, I want to get a sense from you, how will you, I mean, I know you're not on a school board, but that being said, how do you work through the issue when you consider the youth? You know, I wonder what it was like when Prohibition was lifted. And look, I have a 14-year-old and an almost 12-year-old. I don't know what I'm going to say to them when marijuana is legalized.
Well, actually, one of our biggest problems is in our school district,
Right.
according to the police chief. And you know, I don't have the answers. I wish
Right.
I wish I could. And I just think, you know, it's parenting again. I think, I know when we raised our daughter and she got to high school, I
Right.
sat her down and said, this is what's really going to happen to you out there.
It's going to be different, though. I mean, it's different
Yeah.
than when we were kids.
Right.
Then I ask, and I ask you this because of where your city is in terms of topography. I mean, you're a great ag city, an ag region, and boy, I got to think those cultivators are going to come and want to cultivate.
Well, plus we have the best water situation.
Right, and that's true. I mean, Paso Robles is suffering under a tricky water
Yeah.
dilemma, whereas Atascadero isn't.
Well, I think what's going to happen is, you know, they're going to legalize it, and if they're going to legalize it, we have to accept that
right.
and work with it the best way we can. Hopefully, we can control it instead of it going wild.
What about law enforcement? You did mention that you were in law enforcement. You know, if someone's drunk, it's easy to figure that out. We do a
Right.
blood test. I mean, is your police department? You have you're an independent police department. Are they starting to prepare for the possibility of folks driving stoned?
Well, people are doing it right now.
They are, but it's
on
gonna
it,
be different.
and I think, you know, there's going to be a big increase. I think this is going to present problems in the workplace. You know, with people working, if they have a bad back, they go out and smoke something.
Right.
They come back in, they're operating a piece of equipment, and where does the employer have the liability? You know, this is going to be an uphill battle.
The flip side, though, is some nice tax revenue for you.
Well,
I mean-
I've seen the results of drug abuse,
Right.
And they can keep their money if we can
Well,
reduce
that's well stated.
the drug abuse.
That's well stated. The question becomes, I mean, marijuana, as I understand it, is not physically addictive,
Right.
as is alcohol and cocaine. And so,
Well, some people argue. I think from my experience, I've been exposed to it quite a bit, not personally, but I've had a lot of construction people that
Oh,
have
right.
worked for me, people come back from the military, and I would say there's a real good chance that marijuana is a gateway
I
drug
hear
that
you.
opens the door up.
he's Bob Kelley from Atascadero. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Charter Local Edition.